have a lot of agents and new agents, maybe not like they're the ones in the NFL. They're people trying to establish themselves in a new market, but they're also trying to establish the market itself. And there's a ton of misinformation that is out there. So because there's very little transparency that's in there. So it's really, you can fault the NCAA all you want. This is the situation that is here. And it's really murky. And I think that's not, it'll get worse before it gets better.
Welcome back, or welcome to Y Option. I'm your host, Yogi Roth, and we are in the final day of September. We are heading into week 6 of college football, and today's guest, presented by our founding partner, is Bruce Feldman. That's right, the Bruce Feldman of Fox. You see him every weekend on Big Noon Kickoff, as well as reading all of his incredible work on The Athletic. We talk about Kalen DeBoer and the effect that he had, right? Alabama, Arizona, UW. We also talk about financial chemistry. Right, UNLV, a lot of news around that quarterback position. And we dive into the algorithm. Jim Thornby, what's happening? What are you most looking forward to with Bruce? And what do you think about today? Because we also have to get to our awards, Go awards presented by 76.
The financial chemistry conversation is really interesting from the stories that you guys have both heard, from being on campus and stuff like that, and how, benching a player or not, or all that kind of stuff, how there's way more to keep in consideration these days in that scenario. And I won't spoil it, a little teaser here, coming up that you definitely want to listen to you and Bruce talk about that, but it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, he's a really thoughtful guy, and we've prided ourselves. And for all the new listeners, we appreciate all the love around the country that we've gotten from this show. This is college football through the lens of the West Coast. We are not going to scream. We are not going to yell. We will have thoughtful dialogue, thoughtful debate, and conversation about the sport that we love so much. But what we love doing on Monday is we also celebrate the ballers from over the weekend. So, Jim, can you take us through our Go awards presented by our founding partner, 76?
Yeah, and as our little tagline, these awards are not for coaches and players that pump passion, or are for coaches and players that pump passion into every play and just keep going. But the 5-star QB is a 0-star guy. It's such a cool story. I mean, UNLV was the talk of football last week for on and off the field reasons, and then they bring in this a new quarterback. I mean, he's not new really; he's new to them. Haj Malik Williams. He played the last 5 years at Campbell in the FCS. He comes out, he becomes the third quarterback this season with 3 passing touchdowns and 100 rushing yards in the same game. I mean, it's just such a cool story with them. So congrats to the Rebels. They're 4-0 for the first time since becoming a D1 program in 1978. So awesome. Sticking in the Mountain West, go gone. Ashton Genty. I mean, this dude is just incredible. He's at 259 yards, 4 touchdowns against Washington State on Saturday night. The amazing stat with him. I mean, there's a billion amazing stats. I mean, in the newsletter, we kind of compared his start to Barry Sanders' start in 1988 when his record-breaking season. But the one that really stood out to me was he's got 6 runs of 50-plus yards already this season. Twice as many as any other player in college football right now. And I mean, as many as anyone's having in a full season the last several years. The last guy to have more than 6 runs of 50-plus yards in a season was Chuba Hubbard back in 2019 for Oklahoma State. So kudos to him. That dude, no Fafita. And again, like, this is the award that's like not about like just staring at your stats and seeing, how you did. And the momentum turned in that fourth quarter on Friday night. Noah actually threw a pick that turned into a long drive, and all of a sudden the crowd was so loud you could hear, the announcers on ESPN were talking about how they could barely hear each other. And then Noah goes down, leads them on an 8-play, 87-yard drive, culminates with a touchdown pass to Cam Burnett, who we talked about last week on the show, that maybe they get him the more ball, get him the ball more. and he had one of the best games. He had the best game of his career, not one of the best game of his career. So hats off to Noah there, has really stepped up on that drive there to kind of recapture the momentum and knock off number 10 Utah in Salt Lake. And the headset hero for the first time, and I'm sure it won't be the last time, going to an assistant coach this season, Danton Lynn at SC. They were down 21-10 at the half, and they just blitzed Wisconsin in the second half, 28-0. They only allowed 82 yards. They were 1 of 6 on third down. Of the 6 possessions that Wisconsin had in the second half, 3 punts, 2 turnovers on downs, and a pick 6. So, I mean, really impressive what they've done the last 2 weeks in the second half. Because that Michigan game, other than that missed tackle on the Mullings run, I mean, they were lights out in the second half on defense that week too. So, those are the 4 winners.
I love it. Congrats to all of them. I think just a couple notes. This Boise State team, it's going to be good for everybody out west, starting with themselves, right? We're going to get into it here in a minute, but if they keep running the table, if they win their league and they're the highest ranked champion and they have an opportunity to get in the playoff, Jim will dive into that here in a minute. But also it's going to help when you look at what Washington State did to UW. You look at the Oregon game early on this season. Oregon plays UW at the end of the season. Like, this is how the CFP things work. It's early. We'll talk about it as the rankings come out at the end of October. But comping games, comping teams, that is part of it. Really happy to see Noah Fafita do his thing on the road in one of the most hostile places in America. Anybody who's ever been there knows that. It was his second time going to Rice-Eccles Stadium. A huge
as a player.
win.
As a player,
yeah.
He went there often, watching his uncles play there back in the day.
I love it. You are all over all the details. I love that part of who you are, Jim Thornby. But I'll say this also for Utah. It's not over for you as well. Remember, it's a 12-team playoff. You didn't have your starting quarterback. Let's hope Cam Rising comes back, because this team, I think, is a real threat to make noise, not only in the Big 12, but in the CFP if he's healthy. And we finally saw Arizona do what we thought they would do. We picked him to be in the Big 12 championship game in the preseason, them against Utah. So maybe we'll see a rematch of that again. And then I love diving into Danton Lynn. I'm calling SC at Minnesota this week and have been studying their defense all day long here on a Monday. So with that said, let's talk about some of the teams on the West Coast, Jim. Oregon State had a bye. They'll play this weekend. Washington State, they felt that run game of Boise State. They had their first loss against, you could argue, one of the best players, let alone backs, in America. But can you give a little clarity on the CFP path? Because we've been calling these two teams America's teams. Now they both have one loss in this sport.
Yeah, I mean, it will be tough, but it's not impossible for them. They're both will probably have to run the table to really be in the conversation there. And I think what's been kind of surprising so far is a lot of misconceptions about like how the playoff works. I mean, everybody has grasped the concept. It's no longer 4 teams. Now it's 12 teams. But a couple of things that I think people are not really getting. No conference has an automatic bid. The 5 highest ranked conference champions are the ones that get the 5 automatic bids. Now, reasonable people will assume the SEC champion, the Big Ten champion, and most likely the Big 12 champion and ACC champion will get 4 of those 5 automatic bids. But you never know. If you get an upset in a conference championship game, and all of a sudden you could get some really weird conference champions in there. So that can really kind of upset the apple cart there. But there's no highest ranked G5 team like there was in years past, as far as like a consideration type of thing for any New Year's Six Bowls. It is the 5 highest ranked conference champions. So theoretically, I mean, you could have a Mountain West champion and an AAC champion finish ahead of one of those other 4, and that conference champion not be in there. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen by any stretch of the imagination, but the rules are set up that no one currently, we'll see what happens in 2 years. No one currently gets an automatic bid because they're of the conference X. Yeah. And now the thing is too, with Washington State and Oregon State, they won't have a conference champion this year. with the 2 teams, they're not eligible to have a conference champion. So they are part of the at-large field. So they know they're going to have to be ranked 10th or 11th probably in that final poll to get in there. So that means they're going to have to run the table. And they have enough good teams left on that schedule to boost up that resume. And when you look back, if their losses at the end of the season are to Oregon and Boise, that could be conceivably pretty good for them.
Yeah, that's going to be the pitch. I think right now, if you're a fan of either one of those schools, or even any of the schools on the West Coast, you're rooting for either Clemson or Miami to fall off, because right now those two are on a collision course as the 2 best teams in the ACC. So we'll obviously talk about Cal, rooting for the Bears and Justin Wilcox against Mario Cristobal this weekend. You're going to want that to happen to cause a little chaos in that league. And then in the Big 12, you just want to keep playing well. I think you want your teams to continue to be playing at a high level. Colorado got a huge win over the weekend. Travis Hunter, I mean, as a Heisman voter, you got to talk about this guy. I mean, he's just been absolutely dominant in that regard. We already referenced Arizona and, of course, the aforementioned Utah. So I think that if you're Oregon State or Washington State, you got to handle your own business and also root for chaos, probably in the ACC, and then root for Notre Dame to get another loss or 2 along the way, and you'd be cheering for the Trojans when they play Notre Dame later in the season. So
that's funny how that all spins out, right?
It's so unique. I'll say this: the one there's some good elements of realignment. Okay, I'm not going to be that guy. We've done that conversation. One of them is that there's a lot of teams on the West Coast that will have an opportunity to get a seat at this new 12-team playoff. If it was way back in the day, you'd get 1, maybe 2, and you'd be fighting like the Big 12 or the ACC is positioning for the loser of the conference champion to get in, compared to the super conferences in the Big Ten and the SEC. So that's kind of made it fun in terms of our rooting interest every weekend. But I want to talk about the rooting interest of the Big 12, because this conference, it reminds me, Jim, of the Pac-12 in 2017, 18, 19, when everybody was really good. You didn't have a dominant team. Now, the difference is you got logos that span the country and then don't make a lot of natural sense when you're looking at them on an image together, like UCF and Colorado, or now UCF and Utah at the end of the season, or some of these other ones that we've seen, Arizona State, Texas Tech 2 weeks ago. But now we've seen a couple teams emerge. What do you think about the weekend we just saw? Because maybe some teams' favorite in OK State took another loss second week in a row, and this time to a team that probably reminds you a little bit of Utah in K-State.
Yeah, it's funny too, because we went into the weekend thinking that Utah was kind of in pole position of this conference. And while I had a lot of friends back in Arizona texting me with the panic, and I was like, patience. But I'm not going to pretend like I saw a win coming on Saturday night. I thought they would compete and see some progress. But now Arizona is right back in that conversation, because again, that Kansas State game doesn't count against them. That was a non-conference game against a conference opponent. So Arizona back in the mix. They're undefeated in the conference. There's 3 teams right now that are 2-0 in the conference. BYU, who looked really good early against Baylor, where I was texting you on Saturday. I'm like, man, this might be the new team to beat. And then all of a sudden Baylor came storming back. For a minute there, I thought Baylor had kind of gotten broken by Colorado the week before, but they kind of got played a lot better in the second half there. So it's BYU, Colorado, ironically 2-0, and looked really impressive against UCF. Not just the Shador Travis Hunter show of throwing the ball over the place. They ran the ball pretty well. Their defense played well. They got a touchdown on special teams, and the defense especially. I mean, UCF came in there as the number 1 rushing team in the country, and they did a very solid job of playing defense against them. And then the third team that's 2-0, Texas Tech, who now will go to Tucson this week. So now that becomes another big game that maybe you didn't have maybe circled in Sharpie, maybe had it circled in pencil going into this week, but going into last week. But now it's okay, now this is another one. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this shakes out. And
no doubt.
And like we said, chaos here is good for Washington State, is good for Oregon State. They are fans of chaos on and off the field.
Yeah, they are. I'll tell you what, I was just going to say the Texas Tech thing, right? Wazoo put it all over Texas Tech. right? And now you look at this Texas Tech, a win against ASU. Now they play Brent Brennan's squad. So yeah, the drama is not going to end. And I do love the emotional swings that this sport can allow. It's been fun to see that. I think we're feeling it in the Big Ten as well, right? Oregon comes to LA and, pretty convincing win over UCLA. I do love the fight of Deshaun Foster's team. I think, look, you'd be lying if you didn't say that their roster doesn't have the depth. Like they just don't. They don't have the competitive depth that a Penn State has. They got to go face them this weekend. An Oregon team. They just played an LSU team. But what have they done? They've never laid down. You don't see guys fighting on the sideline. You see this team leaving it on the grass. To me, that is a reflection of Deshaun Foster, which is why I'm a fan of give him a shot to rebuild this thing, right? And this team just needs to get through this one this weekend. They'll compete. Hope that Penn State just overlooks them a little bit because we've seen that happen, but big noon kickoff is coming there. So we'll see if they actually do that. And then I'm so curious watching SC against Minnesota. I think both teams in LA have similar issues in terms of the offensive line, right? The pass protection for the USC Trojans and for the UCLA Bruins has been an issue, specifically at the edges. Michigan might be the best defensive front in the country. They're in the conversation. They found ways to get into the backfield. I thought Wisconsin did at times as well. But SC was bailed out by, you referenced the defense, really impressive, really all season long. Then these playmakers, Jacoby Lane, he was up for many of our awards this week in his first 100-yard game as well. So I can't wait to watch that play out on the road. Just got off the phone with people in Minnesota prepping for the game. It's going to be another sellout there. Their place is going to be bonkers because here comes highly ranked USC. So how do the Trojans navigate that?
Another game. Right? Are we still doing that?
Oh yeah. Row the boat, Ski-U-Mah. I've learned all about the Golden Gophers. I'll say this: upset alert for me, and I'll take the smoke if I'm wrong, but I wouldn't be shocked to see Washington beat Michigan this weekend. Washington, when you look under the hood a little bit, they've been able to move the ball. They've played really solid defense. The challenge has been they're killing themselves. Dramatic amount of penalties in the Apple Cup. Dramatic amount of penalties against Rutgers. Penalties we've never seen before. Really impact this team. Jed Fish said at postgame, he said, look, we can't play two teams. We can't beat ourselves and have to beat the opponent. So I anticipate UW to play the best they've played all year, especially in conference play. Michigan, what we don't know about them is how do they navigate being down. They remind me of Utah a lot when Utah had these elite defenses and, weren't great in the throw game, as Coach Whittingham called it. Michigan's the same deal. I think Alex Orji can throw, but can he throw them back being down 14-0? I want to see Washington come out with tempo. I want to see him get Denzel, Boston, some of these guys, get him involved early, see if you can take some shots, make some plays, then start feeding Jonah Coleman. And all of a sudden, I think we might see an upset on Saturday in Seattle on Montlake. But the precursor to that is going to be Friday, short week. Jonathan Smith coming on back. It was joked in the offseason that fans of Oregon State were going to buy tickets to see the Ducks play Michigan State. And I'll say this, Michigan State, the score against Ohio State wasn't pretty, Jim, but they had the ball 3 times in the first half inside the 20-yard line, either turnovers or turnovers on downs. They can play. They can hang in this game. I don't think they'll win this game. I think that the defense is just too formidable. The legs of Dylan Gabriel are too special. But overall, we'll get into previewing the game later in the week. But you just look at where the Big Ten sits right now, and it's just going to be fun in these week-to-week matchups.
Ready, set. Use French fries to go. Yeah, oil from French fries. Turn yesterday's leftovers into today's fuel. More power, lower emissions. 76 renewable diesel fuels all the ways you go, go, go.
Yeah, I'm not ready to go there yet with you, but I'm going to do a little more number crunching here the next 24, 48 hours. But okay. I kind of like your Washington your take right there. I think, especially at home, I think this could really be the game for them. And I think maybe we need to do a little poll, like who are Oregon State fans rooting for this week?
There we go. I think I have an idea.
Michigan State or Oregon? I don't. Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure on that one, but
those
will be 2 fun storylines to.
Okay, let me give you one more storyline.
The next 24 hours.
All right, let me give you this one because this one is about our guest, Bruce Feldman, presented by our founding partner, 76. You talk about Penn State and UCLA. I think UCLA's got a shot in this game if Penn State comes out sleepwalking, or if they play and I mean this respectfully, to their level of competition. They've risen up when they've had to. They've also played down at times this season. I think Big Noon Kickoff going to Happy Valley is a big benefactor to Penn State. Much like I think Miami would have overlooked Cal to a degree. I think Mario Cristobal is a heck of a coach. Friends with him. Big fan of what he's doing there. I love when Miami's back, because when Miami's good, college football is even better. But now College GameDay is going for the first time ever. Thank you, Calgorithm. And Justin Wilcox's team has the spotlight on them, really for the first time since pre-COVID, in my opinion, and the biggest time really ever in their lifetime, other than Oregon State, Cal. What was that? 2009, I think it was 2008, 2007, whatever that year was when the upset happened.
I think that was 7, maybe even
Yeah,
6.
no, I think it was 8, because I was on the sideline at SC and we lost to Stanford that year.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, Cal fans, you know what we're talking about. But how do you see this one before we get to our conversation with Bruce Feldman from an aura standpoint? We'll get into the game later this week, but what do you think about the energy and enthusiasm? You know what it's like to be around College GameDay when it comes to your campus.
Yeah, I've gotten to go to College GameDay twice. I went to, ironically, both of them were UCLA Oregon matchups a couple years ago in Westwood, and then I think it was the year after that in Eugene. The atmosphere is bonkers, and I just can't wait to see what kind of signs. I mean, I'm just thinking of all the memes I've seen through Cal Twitter, all since the couple days leading up to the Auburn game, and then all the post Auburn game, and then leading up to the Florida State game. So I think the signs are going to be off the hook. I think I think Pat McAfee's doing his show on Friday from Berkeley, so that'll be that'll be interesting one as well. So buckle up, Berkeley. I got to see. I got a 12-year-old birthday on Saturday, so I got to see if I can also manage to get out to Berkeley at 4:30 in the morning. But
oh my God, that's
both
awesome.
Both will be bonkers. So we'll
both
see.
will be bonkers. I just think it's hilarious at this stage of where we are in the world, in this country, where they're in Tuscaloosa one weekend and going to Berkeley the next. It's going to be awesome. Like we said to start the season, we're going to be entertained. I will be truly entertained by all of the smoke, all of the noise, definitely all of the signs. Will we get a protest before the game? Like there's just so many things that are unheard of that happen at Cal. But overall, big picture, it's awesome for that program. Marshall Charrington, guy running recruiting, that entire staff. You've earned it. You've earned it. And we'll say it again to the administration. Pour into this program. Look at what they have done. Look at the attention that will be on your school this weekend. Keep riding that wave. So we're going to keep riding this wave and bring on Bruce Feldman. He's a Southern California guy now, just like myself. This is actually where we met. He's become a great friend, Jim, somebody that is clearly, if not the most trusted voice in college football, one of the most trusted voices. Follow all of his content on social media. One of the best writers in the sport at The Athletic. I think one of the best commentators as well. His insight and expertise, what he says on Fox and Big Noon Kickoff. You watch that every single week, and sometimes you can see him on their studio shows next to our good friend Chris Peterson. But we love this conversation because it's about Miami and Cal to kick it off and a bunch of other stuff. Bruce being a Miami alum, it is fueled by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know as you're on the go, go, go. So here's our conversation with good friend Bruce Feldman. Okay, and here we go. Bruce Feldman, good friend, joining the show. We talked about the things that you do in advance of you coming on, because you do a little bit of everything. My favorite thing you do, Bruce, is you coach flag football. And I'm a head coach now again. I'm going into year 2. How's the team? How are you doing this fall with your son and the squad? Got to ask.
So we have 2 different teams. The team that I used to coach, which I can't coach this fall, is in the Snoop and Hoosh League, which is TJ Houshmandzadeh League affiliated with the Chargers. I got to, because I was home in the studio this week, and I got to watch them play on Friday. That team is really good, and they're fun to be around. They know their plays in and out. They know them as well as I do. And it's funny because it's a bunch of air raid stuff that we kind of kidified for them. And it's really neat because they play well together, and it's awesome. The other league that I am coaching in, it's a flag league, but there's blocking in it. So line play is critical, and it's a little bit of a mixed bag because you don't know. Sometimes some of the kids have other activities, and probably our best lineman, is also, plays club basketball. So we didn't have him this weekend, but it's cool where you can see the kids, even when if you win or lose, especially when, sometimes you notice, okay, we didn't win this weekend in this game, but I saw there was some things where we got better at this. You got better at taking on blocks. You got better at blocking downfield. And there's film, so the kids all watch it. Not all of them. Most of them watch it, very closely. And it's really neat when they love football. And, it's such a great sport, as you know, when it comes to teamwork and doing a role and getting better at little things and all that stuff and having a really good attitude. And there's football's been really great for you. It's been really great for me. It's been great for our families, I think. And we're seeing it in our kids. Maybe my daughter doesn't, she hates it, but she doesn't have, it's just like, it's been a really cool thing because you meet a lot of other great families and a lot of other, cool kids. But it's the families you really bond with. That's really awesome. And I'm grateful for that.
I love that. I'm grateful for you. I mean, my wife and I share an office, and she often says, whenever I'm talking to you about flag football, she's like, you sound like you think you're coaching in like major college football, the way that we're breaking it down. So I'm going to need the kidified playbook after we hang up of this conversation so we can gear up. We got our first game coming up this weekend. Also coming up this weekend is College GameDays coming out west for the first time in a long time, the first time ever to Berkeley against Miami. Mario Cristobal coming on back out west. Of course, he spent time as the head coach at Oregon. You spent a lot of time in the state of Florida, also at Miami. You went to school there. You were a student reporter there. You know this team. You wrote the book called Cane Mutiny. What do you make of Miami now? Like, are they as back as they've ever been? And what do you think about this game in Berkeley this weekend?
I think this is the most talented team Miami's had in over 20 years. Let's start with that, because even a few years ago,
over 20 years,
they're not more talented than the Ed Reed teams. Okay. They're not that. But there was a time where, right when it was about to start to fall under Larry Coker, there was a team that beat Florida State in a big bowl game. I think this team is more talented than that one. And I would look at certain parts of this. Cam Ward, to me, is the most gifted quarterback Miami's had in a long, long time, including, Kenny Dorsey was a great college quarterback, but it wasn't like he was going to be able to really extend plays with his legs. He didn't have a big arm. Cam Ward, as we saw on Friday night when he rallied them against Virginia Tech, made some remarkable plays, extending plays and making stuff happen. I think he's terrific. He's such an upgrade from what they've had there in a long time. I think Cristobal has done a really good job with the portal. Damian Martinez, who you know well from his time out in Corvallis, he's a big physical running back who's more than just physical. He's got good feet, and I think he helps. They upgraded the receiver room, the O-line. In a lot of ways, they have it feels a little bit like the best thing Mario does beyond recruiting, I think, is developing linemen. And ID&M. And we saw that at Oregon. Penei Sewell was obviously a special player. There's a bunch of other guys, though, that he added there. And I think you see some of that at Miami now. They're really, really good. Any iteration of Miami football over the last 2 decades, not only would have lost that game to Virginia Tech, they would have probably shut it down in the third quarter and probably lost by 3 touchdowns or 2 touchdowns. That team found a way to win. I'm interested to see how they travel out to Cal. This is, Justin Wilcox, you and I both have a lot of respect for him as a coach. I think he's done a really good job at a place that's now very tough to win. And they, even when they didn't win this year, I feel like they've played, they're competitive. And I do think they're a well-coached team. And this is a tough matchup for them because I just feel like Miami is a deeper team. They've got a lot more playmakers. And I'm interested to see how Miami responds from just an emotional first real test, because they were smashing people before that. So now they go on the road. It's not like it's so weird to me that this is an ACC game, by the way. It's just so bizarre, but it is. And I'm fascinated to see how Cal handles a bigger spotlight.
I wonder if College GameDay coming, like obviously this is huge for Cal, and the Cal algorithm gets a big win prior to even the game starting. But I think that it helps Miami in terms of it gives it the focus that maybe it wouldn't have had, right? I'm
Yeah.
wondering, like, A, if you think there's any credibility to that. And then our good friend Andy Bark sent me a text that I just love and have to share with you. If you think about the quarterbacks that have played at Miami from California, Gino
Gino,
Torretta, Heisman,
Dorsey,
Kenny Dorsey, just Kyle Wright. I remember recruiting him at SC, and he goes there. Brad Kaaya, many more, and now we have Fernando Mendoza, who's literally went to the same high school as Mario
Yep.
Cristobal. His dad and Mario Cristobal were teammates. Like, I've shown the photo in broadcast. I hope if Holly Rowe, who you guys had on your podcast a week ago, is listening, like, get that for this broadcast because it'll be amazing. But I just think there's some unique dynamics to this game. Game day maybe helping Miami in a unique way, and then like the Miami connection in Berkeley among Fernando Mendoza and Mario Cristobal and their families.
Yeah. On top of that, like arguably the biggest recruit Miami ever signed in terms of high profile guys was DJ Williams
De La Salle.
from right up there. De La Salle, super, two-way player, was a massive recruit for them. He's from there. Miami, as you said, like, I was at school when, Gino Torretta was coming through there. And he's one of those guys who's still so connected at UM and has been such an ambassador for the program. So there's a lot of, as you said, there are a lot of ties. Like back in the day, Curtis Johnson, who was, Sean Payton's right-hand guy, they were together at San Diego State, and he was a really good receiver coach who's originally from Louisiana, but they got a lot of guys out of California, not just Northern California, but there was a lot of them. So I could definitely see those kind of parallels.
What do you think about, before we move on, because I want to hit you with a couple other things, but you referenced Justin Wilcox. This is a guy who, you talk about a football family, like, could we be so lucky? Neither one of us are going to be in the NFL Hall of Fame, but can we create an environment where our kids have the humility that Justin Wilcox has as a coach, right? He had that thing tracking pre-COVID, had a chance to go to many other places, notably, of course, Oregon, but he stuck around. Like, he's always said that he really believes in Cal because nobody's ever really done it there. It's just why he's always just thrown down for that place time and time again. What do you make of the job that he has done amid the world of, okay, Cal, if they had the money, I think they could play in the big time world of NIL and some of those teams because they're in California. They do have history there in the program, but the reality is, at least as far as we know, like, they're not among the elites in that regard. But he's got this team, right? They get a big road win earlier in the season against the vaunted team from the SEC. They had every chance to beat Florida State, who I know is down. But what do you think of the job that he's done there navigating this team over the course of his tenure?
Yeah, really good coach who was a really good assistant. I mean, I remember doing a game. It was at Oregon, and it was my open as a sideline reporter was about the relationship between him and Justin Herbert, because like their families go way back together. And I just think that he is really, really well regarded by people inside the sport. And there is something to him because, as you said, I think humility. I remember doing something for Fox where it was later in the season, and I was up there, and we were going to do a short on camera thing. It was after practice, and I remember first the SID and then our producer, they had to ask him to change shirts, and he ended up changing shirts 3 times because it was like what the logo was or whatnot. And I couldn't imagine almost any other power conference coach would be like, whatever you need, I'll do it. It was like after practice. It wasn't like, no, this is the shirt I'm wearing. Like, and it just was like, he's just very, very down to earth. I think he has a very good staff there too. I think he's a guy people want to work for. If you ask me, if he was at Boise State, knowing how he fits there, I think his win-loss record would be way more impressive than it is now at Cal. Take that for whatever it's worth. But like, this is a tough job. Now, obviously, Jeff Tedford had it rolling for a while at Cal. And as you said, there is really good history there, and there's good football around there. But it's just that I know people have worked there, like, the commitment there is just different. A lot of stuff is hard at Cal that it isn't at other places, or it's harder at Cal than it is at other places. And so, I was impressed by what they did in the start. This is going to be a big test for them, but we'll see. I mean, I would not take them lightly if I was Miami.
Yeah, I remember being there his first week on the job, and we were walking around the facility, and I was like, hey, what are you going to put on the walls? Like every coach has their spin. He goes, I don't know just yet. Like I'm gonna wait. And I thought that just spoke volumes of like you don't just put up a bunch of signs because you're supposed to. And he waited until year 2, and now adorning the facility are the 2 words which are smart and tough, which I think define him, define his football family, and I think define Cal. So it'll be fun to see because I think there's an element of Mario Cristobal's team being really tough as well. Looking forward to this one on Saturday. I want to go big picture with you. We've seen what happened, of course, at UNLV with their quarterback. We've seen other players, notably Bear Alexander, ask for a red shirt. I think this goes on this goes on all across the sport, right? Heading into their 4th game of a season, or after an individual is played for, it could be an injury, it could be a variety of things. It just doesn't always get a lot of notoriety. What do you think about the element of NIL and redshirting and what the portal is now and its impact or its future impact on the sport as you see it?
I mean, get used to it. This is the story with Matt Sluka, the quarterback at UNLV. I think we're going to see more of those. I'm not going to say we're going to see a flood of them, but I do think we're going to see more of them. And here's part of the issue, which is you could take the schools at the top end of the food chain who are probably some of the best at doing NIL and have big resources and have a lot of, really sharp people in process working at it. They do not have signed contracts with players before they get on campus. So there is, you and I, or almost anybody else who's working in the media or, working in general, is like, you have a contract to work if you so, and it's like, if you don't, you're like, what are you doing, kind of thing, right? You're putting yourself at risk. But most places in college football right now, you aren't signing anything until they're not putting anything in front of you until you're about to enroll on campus and you're physically there. So what happened here was obviously a he said case. There's a big disconnect, I think. And there's a lot of stuff that I know from our own reporting at The Athletic now with UNLV that I think there's more than that's been out there so far. And it's just kind of interesting to hear it in this process. But right now, I think you have a lot of players looking at it and people close to players, because what you also have, and I tried to, we talked about this on our big noon kickoff show on Saturday morning at Fox, but I think this point needs to be hammered home, not just about there are no contracts for most of these players until they get there, but also you have a lot of agents and new agents, maybe not like they're the ones in the NFL. They're people trying to establish themselves in a new market, but they're also trying to establish the market itself. And there's a ton of misinformation that is out there. So because there's very little transparency that's in there. So it's really, you can fault the NCAA all you want. This is the situation that is here. And it's really murky. And I think it'll get worse before it gets better.
Okay, so let's stay on that for a second. I want to get to the games because I'd imagine you're going to Penn State this weekend with Big Noon.
Yes.
Cool. So I think the inverse of that is a really critical conversation of what you just referenced. And I think it's important to be thoughtful. So let's just take what we think we know. Let's just say DJ Uiagalelei at Florida State got a nice deal to go there and the opportunity to play for Mike Norvell on a team that had a chance to go to the playoff. And then he gets benched. You could look at Jackson Arnold, goes to Oklahoma. We know him from being an Elite 11 MVP. He gets pulled. How do you feel about the inverse of players that seemingly, right, we would assume that there's a large portion of NIL going from a collective to the quarterback. And then you think, all right, well, can they pull them? How are they pulling them? What are the dynamics around that? I think it's important because it's the first time we've ever gone through that. So I'm curious if you've heard anything from the road. And I say that because I think fans are saying, pull the guy, bench the guy, the coach should do this. And it's like, well, hold on. Like there's so many things at play now compared to what they were 3 or 4 years ago. I'm curious if what your thoughts.
Yeah, Yogi, though, I also feel like there's been examples of first-round quarterbacks who have been given probably a longer leash because the franchise has been so invested in them. So you do have that. I definitely think the part that's maybe different here when it comes to these NIL contracts is if there is an out. in terms of like, oh yeah, so and so didn't actually fulfill all their obligation of what they're supposed to do. I mean, I don't think anywhere in there it says you're supposed to throw 4 touchdown passes and lead us to wins every game. But I think that there are certainly stories of players not getting what they thought they were signed up to be getting, but then they get caught in this area where there's other stuff that maybe they didn't do, and that's part of their contract. And again, it's a different animal than what we have in pro sports. But yeah, I think there's something to be said for this. I remember a couple of years ago, we were at a school for Big Noon, and it was a Big Ten school, and they had told me they had spent $500,000 on a pass rusher, and that pass rusher had like 1 sack. And so that's a bad investment, right? There's no way around it, right? But look, there's a lot of people who make bad business deals. I mean, like you could go to a restaurant and get a really bad meal. It's not like you're not going to pay for it because like, and this is on a larger scale, but I think there's all sorts of circumstance that can go into it, and, but at the end of the day, I think there's always going to be people who either turn out to be better values or worse values. I think that, Mike Norvell looked like a great coach when they were 13-0, and now people are kind of like, is he on the hot seat? I was like, well, they handled the portal a lot better last year than they did this year. They made better investments that turned out, and I don't think that necessarily reflects on how we think of him as a coach, but it does, because that factors in now talent acquisition is something that is significant. Like I imagine, at least I've heard this, Georgia may not have to pay quite as much as some other people for certain players, because it's almost like Kirby Smart's going to get a NFL development deal. Like they produce in players. Guys want to be part of that, as opposed to if you're at some other school in the SEC that doesn't have the same track record.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The financial chemistry question I've loved asking, whether it was Ryan Day or Lincoln Riley or other coaches, of how you navigate that. Because to your point, it is real. A couple things.
Real quick on that point, because I think it's worth digging into for a second more. One of the coaches I know is an offensive coordinator, said, we talk about this daily, as we will be really good as long as nobody worries about who gets the credit. The minute human nature starts to creep in, that's when we're going to struggle. And I thought that was like a very interesting point. And he said, I hit on it daily.
I believe it. I mean, you watch Ohio State and you read about that roster and you just look at such an unselfish group, and not just from touches, but blocking downfield, like the little things. I just got done rewatching their game. Same thing with a lot of these teams, I think, that are quote unquote at the top of the market. So kudos to whoever that coach is. We'll take that and apply it to our flag team in some way. Like everybody doesn't get a popsicle, okay, guys? Just so you know, post game. All right. So at that point, let's talk about LA and the schools in our backyard. I'm calling SC at Minnesota this week. Was just told minutes ago I got UCLA, Minnesota next week. You will be at UCLA at Penn State with Big Noon Kickoff and that incredible show with Fox and the rest of our friends out there. What do you think of the defensive turnaround and just the overall outlook of SC, especially over the last 2 weeks, right? Tale of two halves, you could argue, in both games. And then UCLA in year one under Deshaun Foster as you prepare for Happy Valley.
On the USC side, I think Danton Lynn has been a terrific hire, just like he was for Chip Kelly a year ago, overhauling that defense, right? We knew they had all sorts of issues. It was a bad tackling team before, and you can watch the Michigan game a couple of weeks ago, and Kalel Mullings takes over the game and, breaks tackles. But by and large, there was a lot of good open field tackles that got Michigan into 4th and 2 as opposed to a first down and who knows how longer. Like I thought that was impressive. The biggest challenge to me for USC, going from being a top 25 team, which they are now, to being a real playoff contender and a team that can be dangerous, is Lincoln Riley has to find a way to significantly upgrade the O-line and the D-line. Because right now, those are the areas where, like, I don't have to tell you this, but like when you coached at USC, this is when I first moved out there. They have nothing like Mike Patterson, nothing like that guy. Sean Cody was a really good D lineman. I know Omar Nazel wasn't like an NFL, but he was smart and he was a good player. And Kenichi Udeze was that was a really loaded D line. And then it was like Cedric Ellis was this super strong man in the middle. Like they had guys. I'm not saying they're awful on the D line, but that's a part where they don't look like a team that looks like it's ready to play in the SEC, right? The O line, I'm not saying they don't have any talent there, but it's a struggle right now. Miller Moss, to his credit, is making throws with guys in his face, and he's tough, and I think he's been really good. And the receivers are really talented, and they're really young. But it's like that's the area where they have to get a lot better. Now on the bright side, they play defense now. And I think they can sell that. And you're seeing some good young players. We know they have money in NIL to try to make a run at guys. They just, like they took, and again, the season's only a month old. So who knows? Maybe the bottom will drop out again. But I think if they can keep this up, I'm not saying, if they go 9-3, there's teams that I think are more talented than them. This is not a super talented USC roster. But if they can go 9-3, they can build off this, whether they make the playoff or not. Just keep playing hard. I think we know Lincoln can attract offensive skill talent. It's got to be, in the trenches. They have to be able to nail that down. But if I was a USC fan, I'd be like, okay, this is much better than where it felt when Lincoln was standing there at Lucas Oil Field or stadium at Big Ten Media Days in Indiana. At that point, it was like, because I remember talking to somebody I'm pretty close to at USC, and it was like, you guys just need to get to the games, because right now people are taking shots at you in recruiting. Recruiting doesn't look like it's going, perception-wise, doesn't look like it's going great, at least by USC standards. And now you had some games. I mean, I don't want to read too much into Utah State and that performance, but like the old USC would have won that game, but they probably the recently old USC would have won that game like 44-21 or something. And I thought LSU was a really good win. LSU is good on offense. They may not be good on defense, but they're good on offense. And like, again, I don't want to go crazy on them winning at Michigan or losing at Michigan one way or the other. They were close. This isn't a great Michigan team. I know they're the defending national champs, but the offense has been entirely rebuilt. It's one-dimensional. So, but again, it's the way they're looking. To me, that is good. And so just got to keep upgrading the roster.
Yeah, I keep calling it a foundational year. Like, I just think the foundation's solid. It's not full of, transfers and an elite quarterback who's just out of his mind. Like, I think they're moving in the right direction. A 9-3 year would be, to me, a very successful year. Let's talk about year one for Deshaun Foster. I want to hear, like, how do you prep for Big Noon? What is it like? Have you? I assume you've been to Happy Valley many times before, but what is it like in that environment? And then what do you make of year one and the first month of the season under Deshaun Foster?
Yeah, so for us, it's obviously a long trip to go to State College from Southern California. And we've been there. Last year, we had one of their games, and, we saw them play Ohio State home. A couple of years ago, we saw them play Michigan home. It's an awesome setting. The fan base is incredibly loyal. I know you're from that state. You know it. They're proud of their program, and they're a really good team. I don't know, from a Penn State standpoint, they are really good. The issue is, can they get great, right? Because that's the difference between them. They can beat up on the rest of the Big Ten, but when it comes to the superpowers, and this year the superpower again is Ohio State. Michigan, I don't think is that, but like there's been a gap. So we'll see if Drew Aller, it's like his numbers are like really sterling, except for in those two games last year, he just didn't look great. But now it's the second year, and Andy Kotelnicki has been an awesome addition, and he does some funky stuff, and it works, and so we'll see with them. As for UCLA, Deshaun did not take over a great situation. This is a program, and we knew this from Chip Kelly's time there, where NIL is a problem for them. I think NIL is still a problem for them. And, I think a lot of the fans were kind of over Chip Kelly because they felt like he didn't care about recruiting. And I thought they had a chance because he was good in the portal the first couple of years. I think it got a lot harder when guys could transfer again. And then he would, guys would, they would play better at UCLA. And then all of a sudden somebody else would offer them 250 grand and UCLA didn't have that money and they're losing them. And so you look from a talent standpoint, there's some good players there, but they're punching up against almost everybody in the Big Ten. They're definitely going to be punching up against Penn State. Like they don't have the athletes Penn State has. I give them credit. I thought they played hard against LSU. That's a tough place to play. They didn't get blown off the field. They didn't get embarrassed. I mean, this weekend I watched the Oregon game like you. I was in studio, and I'm about to feel like going into halftime. I feel like they're about to go down like 35-3, and then Addison, their big safety has a pick six, goes like 95 yards. It doesn't change the game, but at least it's not like a complete blowout at halftime. Because I think at that, coming off of the Indiana game where they got shelled, like you were looking, it was like the combined score of their first 6 quarters, if the pick six doesn't happen, was going to be like 76-10 or something, unsightly. So UCLA needs some good stuff to happen in the second half of the year for Deshaun. I mean, right now it feels like they have no momentum. They're not very good on the O-line. I think Garbers is a good quarterback. Last year, as long as he was healthy, they were pretty good with him in there. But I just feel like they're so undermanned right now. And this is a tough job. I mean, it became a lot harder with NIL. It feels a little bit like the Cal job in terms of headaches that are kind of unique. You're in a big market, but you're not the big show in the big market. And anything we know, USC is always going to be that. They got a guy who loves the place. They got a guy who is a good, decent man who I think anybody who meets him likes him. It's just, he also added some assistants who haven't been in college football in a long time. And I feel like they're learning as they go. And I don't know if they're going to be in a deeper hole, from this than they were going into it, to be honest.
Yeah, it's really going to be fun to track. I think for both teams in LA, I think offensive line is an area where we've seen them get exposed at times, whether it was the Michigan game at the edges or even at times in the Wisconsin game last week for SC. Looking forward to watching that one this weekend on Saturday night on Big Ten Network. And then for the Bruins, same deal. They don't have the competitive depth, and they're going to go up against, you could argue, the best front in the Big Ten, or at least in the conversation with Zane Durant, Abdul Carter and company. So they're going to have to get the ball out. Only 4 offensive touchdowns on the season for the UCLA Bruins. So I think they do good stuff. They just haven't found consistency yet in a game, let alone throughout a half. All right, so let's talk about the Kalen DeBoer effect, right? So we've got Bama. I know you were all over that game. At halftime, we went in to start recording stuff, and then all of a sudden you're looking at your phone, and you're like, oh my God, what happened in that game? But he gets a huge win. Jed Fish has a tough loss, but they win pretty much every statistical category outside of penalties and made field goals, right? In the Rutgers game, they lose in an awesome environment in Piscataway. They got Michigan coming to town this weekend. And then Brent Brennan gets the biggest win of his early tenure on the road at Utah. What do you make of that trifecta right there among those 3?
Yeah, first of all, awesome job for Kalen. I think anybody who has been around him is like pretty amazed by him. The fact that I had this conversation with Chris Peterson, my colleague at Fox, who obviously was the head coach at Washington, brilliant guy who you know well. And we talked about, can Kalen stay the same guy who somehow he was the same guy at Sioux Falls and NAIA that he was not just at Fresno and not just as a Big Ten offensive coordinator, but then at Washington. And I tell this story and it kind of circles back to the where we started this a little bit. So we do the Alabama-Wisconsin game. And I don't know, and I'm not the sideline reporter, so I'm pretty free to schmooze with whoever I can. And I see Kalen out there. We have a really good relationship and have had a lot of conversations over the last few years. And I just want to say hi to him because it's a big road atmosphere. And I do. And we talk for, 5-10 minutes. And I'm like, okay, this doesn't feel like a typical, there's no way this conversation would have happened with his predecessor. or anything like it. And so on the flight home, I'm sitting with the game producer, Chuck McDonald, and Chuck was like, "What were you and DeBoer talking about?" We saw him laughing. And I was like, "Oh, you guys had," he was like, "Yeah, we had a camera on him all the time, like this head coach." And I said, "What's funny is we start talking and he goes, 'How's Ben doing?' Well, Ben's my kid. He's 10 years old." And Kalen started a conversation about like him and youth football and all this stuff. And it was like, I'm not saying no coach would do that. I'm sure they have small talk with the other coach if they know him well. But I was just like, this is right before his game against a legit Big Ten opponent in a really cool environment. And he's asking some random dude about his 10-year-old kid. And the point being, like, this guy is so comfortable in who he is and so like down to earth, and he's going to do it a different way than Nick Saban did it in Tuscaloosa. I'm not saying he's going to do it better, because it's hard to be better than the greatest college football coach of all time, but I think people are definitely relate to him well. I think there is a speed that he comes out at, because we know he's a really good X and O's guy. He's a really good offensive coach, but I just think this kind of temperament he has, I think that's why, like, there's a crazy stat of him. Like, I think he's like 13-2 all time against top 25 opponents and 5-1 against top 10 teams. Well, part of that is because I think his team is not super tight, and so they'll take on their personality. That's why they jumped all over them. And it was like, look, credit to Georgia, they battled back, but also credit to Alabama that they found a way to not fold after everything seemed like it was going against them.
Yeah, it's impressive to watch him, and I'm looking forward to watching them the rest of the way. And you're right, you're always rooting for good guys, and especially the guys that let you in a little bit. Same deal. Kalen DeBoer has let both of us into a variety of his programs: Fresno State, UW, and now at Alabama. That's awesome, man. I can't wait to watch UW this weekend, and Michigan and Arizona. Keep it moving with Brent Brennan.
I left you hanging on the other two, because
that's okay.
So with Jed in Washington, watch that game. Obviously, there was a moment in there right before halftime where you're like, what did they just do? It was like you have a player to run on the field, and it was like big momentum swing, obviously, for Rutgers. They get points out of it. I'm not surprised that Rutgers won that game. Rutgers is good now under Schiano. They're physical. They have a big time running back. And it's a long trip, right? And I think from having been up at Washington this summer, you kind of knew that, like, this is a pretty big rebuild. They were just in the national title game, but they also lost like almost every starter who played in the national title game, right? So I think that's a good hire for Washington, and I think I could see them winning 8 games, 7 games, but it's again, they have to almost start from scratch. The other game, watching Arizona, I think that was a huge win for him, because I just feel like there was a bunch of people who could look at that going, man, we should have been better than this. We're in a conference now that doesn't have legit, I don't think they have any top 10 teams in the Big Ten. Like last year, Arizona was in, like Washington played for the national title game. Oregon was real close. And here is Arizona, where, I think if they had gotten in the, because you got to talk to those guys, and I'm sure you've heard this too. If they got in the Pac-12 title game, we're winning whoever we're playing. We're not losing now because we're on this roll. And, Noah Fafita just says like this little gunslinger, and he's dangerous because he's got a ton of confidence. He's got I'm hesitating because I know Jeremiah Smith is now out there, but like he's probably got the best receiver in the country. Like I think T-Mac is phenomenal. But then there's other things like the O-line has been banged up. And again, I feel like that is a concern. And I think for people who are starting to go, oh, we should be a top 10, top 15 team. I know what the program looked like when Fish left, and almost all those guys stayed. Now, Jonah Coleman obviously didn't. There's a few other really good players who didn't. But most of those guys, including the star quarterback and the star receiver, are still there. So I think they were big expectations. And if they had lost that game to Utah, especially without Cam Rising, I think that would have been a gut punch to the fan base there. I think it was important for Brent Brennan to get that win. I think his players backed him up, and we'll see what they can do with it now. I mean, that conference is wide open.
Yeah, it really is. It was a huge win on a big stage and in that environment in Salt Lake City. It's always great to have you in this environment, Bruce. You've been on a version of my podcast for over a decade probably now, but the first time here at Y Option. Thank you for your friendship. You've supported me in many, many endeavors, including flag football coaching, but also as a friend, man. It's been awesome getting to know you over the better part, I guess, now 2 decades. So thanks for coming on, man, and best of luck in the flag game and travel safe to Happy Valley.
Great talking to you, Yogi. Always a pleasure. I feel like I always feel better about the world after I have a conversation with you, whether it's on camera, on a podcast, or just over the phone.
I love it. Thanks, brother. It's the Afterglow. That was Bruce Feldman, presented by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know on the go, go, go. Yogi Roth, Jim Thornby. This is the part where we evaluate the conversation. What do we wish we asked? What did we learn? Jim, what'd you learn from Bruce Feldman?
I mean, what did I not learn from Bruce Feldman is the better question there. I mean, it's been great getting to, really get to know and work with a little bit Bruce the last couple of years. So it's always, get a little bit smarter. It makes me think of, like, I remember when Kenny Dillingham was still the offensive coordinator at Oregon with Bo Nix. And I remember we set up an interview to do with Bruce and Kenny. And I remember, like, it might even have been mid-interview. Like, I texted you and it was like, dude, Kenny Dillingham is the dude. And that was all because Bruce was like, hey, this is the guy we got to talk to. I'm like, 100%, let's go. So, like, again, he's got his finger on the pulse of everything college football. So anytime you get a chance to talk and or listen to Bruce, you got to do it.
Amen to that. Yeah, number one, I'm a fan of him as a friend. We're both flag football dads, so hopefully you could double time speed that one if that was annoying off the top. But I got to ask Bruce what he's doing with his flag team. But then too, I just think his thoughtfulness. All right, we pride ourselves on having real thoughtful conversations. You got to bring out people that are thoughtful as well. Bruce is exactly that. I think he's really well thought out. He's got great reasoning behind his thoughts, clearly dramatically well sourced, and just somebody who loves the game and the future of the game. So we will have him back. I'll be so curious to hear what his weekend is like in Penn State. Make sure you check out that big noon kickoff as well as College GameDay. Technology can do it. You can have them both on at the same time. Maybe you can spot Jim at College GameDay.
You record both at the same time, and then you just kind of go back and forth.
There's the expert that we love, Jim Thornby. But a lot of love to all of you. Make sure you check out our newsletter. Just go to yoption.com. We love pouring into that thing every Sunday. I give you my thoughts from 30,000 feet on a flight home. This past weekend, I was in studio, did not sleep, did the old Vegas move where, like, you party all night and then you just get on a plane. We partied, I guess, just being on TV, talking about football, quick shower, right to the plane, right to the newsletter. But hopefully you guys enjoy all of that. Our awards drop every Monday, the Go, Go, Go Awards presented by our founding partner, 76. And then we try to have a couple conversations a week that are really powerful. This one kicks off week 6. So enjoy your week 6. Please, please, please keep pouring into whatever it is that you love with a ton of joy. We've been doing that. It's been fun to hear the feedback from all of you, and away we go. Time to get back into game prep, and hopefully you enjoy your game week as week 6 is here, and we all probably need a nap. All right, peace. I'm out.